Hello, welcome to another Purple Insider Extra. Matthew Coller along with Sam Ekstrom here. And it is not an April Fool's joke. The Minnesota Vikings have signed a guard. That is, if you're on other social media platforms, you'll see all the time any Viking signing. Is it a guard? Can the guy play guard? Well, this guy can. Chris Reed played for the Indianapolis Colts last year, has bounced around the league a little bit, a Mankato guy, so they bring him home to Minnesota, and it appears, Sam, that the good old-fashioned right guard competition, of which we are well trained to cover, just got a little bit thicker with Chris Reed now in the mix.
I think if they can now sign Shane Zylstra, they would have the Mankato monopoly, right? Or the bingo or whatever it is. They need to get all of the former Mavericks. Chris Reed is probably somewhere between Austin Schlottman and Jesse Davis in terms of offseason interior line help. He has started in a full-time role before and was not terrible. In fact, his grade that year was better than anything Jesse Davis ever did with Miami, but he is not very seasoned. And when the Vikings have tried to play unseasoned players in big roles, it has not gone well, whether that's Nick Easton or Tom Compton or Oli Udoh, or Dakota Dozier for that matter. It's been kind of a disaster. So I don't think this is a player the Vikings want to be starting, but it is someone with interior flexibility. It allows them to have an option behind Jesse Davis if he is the starter, who is not terrible and not inexperienced. Doesn't express a whole lot of confidence, Matthew, in Oli Udoh or Wyatt Davis, the two incumbents from last year. Not to say Davis was necessarily an incumbent, but someone who was on the team.
Right, and drafted with a third-round pick, and yet this, as you said, does not show a whole lot of belief or confidence in him. And if he's going to win the job, he's going to have to do it over players with quite a bit of playing experience. Chris Reed, as you mentioned, has been a starter before, and Jesse Davis has been a regular starter for years. So if he's going to rise to the challenge, he's going to have to beat out veterans for that job. But it does say when the new coaching staff came in and looked at what they had, they were not ready to say, oh, the previous regime, they got it completely wrong with Wyatt Davis. They're more trying to hedge their bet here. And if Wyatt Davis rises to the challenge, well, then he can win that starting job and they should feel pretty good about it. I think that there's two options when you're looking for offensive line help, Sam. One of the options is you spend an incredible amount of money and you get a really great player. That was, say, Joe Tooney last year. Well, the Vikings don't have that. And so the other option is that you try to grab veteran players and you hope that they're a good fit. And if they give you average play, that's great. If they give you anything more than that, maybe they're a better fit in your system than wherever they were previously playing, then you hit a home run. And we have seen this before. It's not that the Vikings have made every bad decision on the offensive line, though there have been quite a few. But Joe Berger would be an example of this, of a guy who was kind of a backup for most of his career, came to Minnesota, played a couple of different positions at a very high level. I'm not saying that either one of these guys, Jesse Davis or Chris Reed, will do as well as him, but I think that in this case, when you look at some of those numbers that are underneath the surface for Chris Reed on Pro Football Focus, for example, I mean, there's at least something to look and say, this guy can competently play that position. With Dakota Dozier in the past, he had almost never played a full season. And the same went for Tom Compton. Like, those guys had only played a couple of games in a row. And then they said, no, go out and play 16 games. And that's where eventually their weaknesses were revealed, at least with the players they're taking shots on here. These guys are experienced to be able to play a full season if they have to. And whoever loses this job can provide depth.
Yeah, I don't know if they're planning on drafting Tyler Linderbaum in the draft, but I'm a little puzzled that these pickups are not centers. They don't even have center experience. And I'm still wondering who their backup center is exactly, because Nick Martin played for $1 million and change last year for the Raiders. Very, very good center in his career. He's available. I mean, there are centers available, and if it's not J.C. Treader, I know he's going to be expensive. Nick Martin would have been a phenomenal backup, and the Vikings have not invested in center play, so they're expressing a ton of faith in Garrett Bradbury, but not a lot of faith in their guard positions, which is interesting. You'd think they would want maybe at least the option to make wholesale changes on the interior, but they're riding with Garrett Bradbury. So it's just an interesting approach that, okay, they're willing to bring in all of these guards to compete, but at the same time, they're just going to ride with the same guy at center. I don't know if I understand that, especially when they need to prioritize pass blocking even more in this offense. But Garrett Bradbury still sitting nicely on top of that depth chart.
Right. Austin Schlottman only has a tiny bit of previous experience playing at the center position. Though if he were able to beat out Garrett Bradbury, I don't think that would give you a ton of confidence in him. It would more just be telling about where Bradbury stands. Now, let's just talk about the offensive line as a whole here. Do we think that it is markedly better than what they were running out to start last season? And you could count Christian Darrisaw as a part of starting last season. Count this with Christian Darrisaw. Do you think that what they've done so far, which is left Ezra Cleveland in his spot, done nothing with Garrett Bradbury, and created this big competition with a lot of people at right guard, will that play out better than it has in previous years?
I'm pretty comfortable with where Brian O'Neill is at, obviously. And even if Ezra Cleveland doesn't improve, if he plays at the same level he did in the second half of last year, I'm comfortable with that as well. Christian Darrisaw had some pretty high level moments, but he had some whiffs as well. You want to eliminate those negative plays where you're literally just getting run past for a sack. I mean, you can't have that. He had a few of those last year, but I think I like the trajectory. I still think they've got question marks. Like that, just because they have some veterans to possibly play right guard, I don't feel amazing about that. And as I just alluded to, I don't feel amazing about center. I know that Kevin O'Connell said at the owners' meetings that he's happy that they only have one or two question marks in the offensive line, but you knew about those question marks going into the offseason and you didn't really answer them. I mean, you had the money. You clearly showed that you had the ability to spend, and they didn't choose to spend at least, more than $1 million or two on those spots. So I think it was within the team's control to address that. They didn't. They're confident that they can find these diamonds in the rough, and we'll have to see how it plays out. But whenever the old regime of the Vikings tried to do that, it usually fell flat.
Right. I think that they're still taking a pretty big risk here, even though Chris Reed played fairly well when he was given a chance in a full-time job, and then decently for the Indianapolis Colts with a lot of fill-in work and over 500 snaps last season. And Jesse Davis has had his moments as well. Still, you're talking about players who are very much by all of their metrics in the middle of the league. And we know that Kirk Cousins and the way he plays quarterback sits in the same spot in the pocket, is not an escape type guy that is going to bail you out if you have troubles. And we have seen some offensive linemen for the Vikings go elsewhere and maybe have a little more success than they did in Minnesota. It could be in part because they're never bailed out by Kirk Cousins' mobility. So I think they needed to upgrade more than this, even though they have taken the right approach of bringing in multiple people to battle that job out. And then by the end, you feel like you've done better. Also, I think they have better depth than they had. That in last year and previous years, if one person went down, it felt like you were just kind of falling off the side of a cliff, which is the case, I think, for a lot of teams in the NFL and the offensive line. But it was quite the fall off the cliff when the next man up had to play, i.e. Drew Samia, for example, when he got in 2020. As far as the offensive line as a whole, I'm not ready to say that it's taking a huge jump because they're having a competition. We've seen that before. It really depends to me on Christian Darrisaw and on whether Garrett Bradbury can be better in this system, which we don't know yet. I mean, that's something that we're going to be, looking for as they go forward. Is there ways that they could protect Garrett Bradbury more than the previous regime did? I would say I'm skeptical about that. And Darrisaw's health matters a little bit too. So I think I'm in wait and see mode here, but you know what, Sam? We'll be ready. We will be ready for daily right guard updates from TCO Performance Center.
Got the notebook page already mapped out with the two columns, like which one gave up more pressures. I'm so prepared because I've done this so many times.
All right. If they bring in one more kicker, then we'll be complete for our training camp experience when that comes around. And of course, you'll want to be subscribed here and go to purpleinsider.com for our written work and listen to the Purple Insider podcast for all of the latest on right guard competitions and much, much more. Thanks so much for watching this Purple Insider Extra.